Do you need an honest reappraisal of what the inflation outlook for 2022 is in your country, in Zimbabwe? Minister.
Oh, yes, we've done very well in bringing inflation down. We brought it down from as high as over 800% down to 66% on a year-on-year basis. Of course, at the moment, we're being impacted by the whole global scenario, the global spillovers in terms of imported inflation via the global oil price, via the supply chain challenges. But also we're benefiting, on the other hand, because we are a commodity exporter in the form of base metals, nickel and others. Those are remaining strong, and that's very helpful. But on the inflation front, we are importing inflation. Our target for the year was about 20% odd, but we may be slightly higher, but the inflation trend for us is still downwards.
Minister, how much breathing room do you have before things get problematic? There was a thinking among some investors and some participants in this market that the Ukraine war will be over sooner rather than later. We're a month in. It doesn't look like it's going to be over anytime soon. When does it become a critical issue, and how can you give yourself more breathing space? What additional steps can you take?
One step that we've taken is to reduce taxes on petroleum products, on diesel and petrol, just to make sure that we can cap the impact of those prices on inflation domestically. So we've reduced the taxes on that. We think that we can keep this going for a while. I think it will go a long way in ameliorating against the imported inflation, at least through the fuel prices. Then on the fiscal front, we continue to run things tightly, as much as we can. But of course, every economy, whether Zimbabwe or anywhere in Africa or around the world, is impacted by this crisis. It just puts on fiscal pressures via inflation. But we're certainly doing our best. I think that we should be able to be, to pull through, but it will be a lot of hard work and a big balancing act in terms of civil servants' wages, making sure the industry is not adversely affected. But also, as I said, that the positive thing is that our exports on the commodities front are quite strong in terms of our base metals.
Mthuli, look, I'm going to catch up with the South African leader here later. He's got the same boom on exports, but the same cost of living crisis. You say you will be able to continue the subsidy on fuel. Can you be more exact? Are you going to need an additional budget? And how much will you allocate to fuel subsidies this year?
Oh, that's difficult to predict. It just depends on how the global oil price will evolve over time. If it stabilizes where it is, around where it is, we won't be needing any sort of additional subsidies as such, but we'll continue with the policy that we have in place, which is just containing the increase in the fuel price via changes in the taxes that we charge on fuel. We think that's the best way, to handle it. But I don't think we will need anything beyond that. But let's see how it turns out. Let's see if it will hold at these kind of levels.
One of the big conversations is how many times the Fed is going to hike rates. Have you thought about it much? What do you think they're going to do? And if they do go 6, 7, maybe even 8 times, they said they're going to do everything they can to bring inflation back under control. How does that kind of ripple back through to what you do day to day?
Of course, in Zimbabwe, we also use the United States dollar as a transaction currency in addition to the Zimbabwe dollar. Any increase in interest rates in the U.S. is likely to strengthen the U.S. dollar against the domestic currency. But also higher interest rates in the U.S. and globally have the impact of draining liquidity from emerging markets and frontier markets such as ours. So this will have an impact on Zimbabwe, but we'll wait to see how this will go. But I can see why rates have to go up in the U.S. Inflation is on the up, on a record high, and inflation is on the up everywhere. So we're seeing this general increase in interest rates, rising yields. It's just a new normal that we have to grapple with and be prepared to manage these shocks as they come through.
Yeah, well, certainly the head of the Fed, Mr. Powell, is using language which invokes bigger moves to come. The other supply side issue for you in Zimbabwe is on grains, and a lot of that supply disruption from Ukraine. Where do you turn to fill that gap? How are you filling that supply gap?
I must say that on the corn front, the maize front, we are okay. We do have a decent surplus from last year's bumper harvest. Issues perhaps around wheat and wheat prices. So we have to look at other sources that could support us in sourcing wheat. But we are going into our own wheat planting season now. So we really want to make sure that we support local production of wheat. But of course, fertilizer prices have gone up, because again, Ukraine and Russia are big, producers of these, commodities. So that's going to impact the cost of growing the wheat. But we're determined to support local production as a way out and look at other sources around the world.
What kind of talks are you having with potential partners from the IMF and World Bank to kind of assist you through further turbulence down the remainder of 2022, depending on how the Ukraine war evolves and the commodity surge?
Well, our relationship with the IMF is focused mainly on technical assistance, on how to fine-tune different policies, be it a tax regime for the mining sector to improve performance of the sector. In fact, one thing that we've benefited from the IMF is the removal of an export tax for beneficiation. We'd imposed this tax a few years ago. It was discouraging investment in the PGM sector, and they recommended that perhaps we should take it off. And it was a very good idea, and we implemented that. So that technical assistance has been fundamental to how we've managed the economy. They have just completed the Article 4 report and mission. If the report was discussed by the board 2 days ago, it should be available soon for all analysts to peruse through it and take a look at the kind of reforms that we've been implementing. So our relationship has been great, and we really appreciate the technical assistance they have given us in terms of policy direction.